What's up, everybody? Nick Whalen, Alex Barutha here from RotoWire, giving you some waiver wire targets in the fantasy basketball world. Still dealing with the NBA Cup right now, so certainly in an abbreviated schedule this week, and with the NBA Cup finals coming up in the week ahead, we'll have an abbreviated week as well. But in general, a higher volume week than the week before, still a low volume week overall. I will note right off the bat, Alex, the Sacramento Kings are the only team that plays 4 games in the coming week. So if you're in a weekly lineup league, think about maybe snatching up some Kings. 12 teams play 3 games. 17 teams have only 2 games. So again, a pretty low volume schedule overall. A couple names that jumped out to me, Alex, when I was scanning the waiver wire across some of my leagues. These are not sneaky ads, but players who should be rostered. And if they're still out there, they're available in about 60, 70% of leagues. Make sure you double check. Dosunmu, Dereck Lively, DeAndre Hunter, who's like the 7th best player in the NBA all of a sudden, and Goga Bitadze. Those were the guys who jumped out as a little bit lower than should be roster rates.
Bitadze's on my list. I'm not really worried about him becoming irrelevant in fantasy when Paolo Banchero eventually comes back. I think they'll continue to play him and Wendell Carter Jr. together. I'll also add Bilal Coulibaly to that list. Sure. It's not just because he had a nice game the other night, like he got hot shooting after being like the coldest shooter in the entire NBA. But even during that cold stretch Coulibaly was on, he was still averaging 26 fantasy points a game, which is enough for a lot of standard leagues just to have him on the back of your bench. So I think where his averages are now are pretty normalized and someone worth rostering in standard leagues, I think.
If we dig a little bit deeper, we'll get in the mud as this video goes along. Believe me, I got some names that I'm not proud of here, Alex, but Royce O'Neale is somebody to keep an eye on in Phoenix. He's about 89, 90% available, depending on where you look. And somebody that we talked about a little bit last week, I'm surprised that his number hasn't climbed a bit higher. Kelly Olynyk, 9% rostered right now in ESPN leagues. He's only played a couple of games, but the absence of Scottie Barnes, I think he's going to miss at least 1 to 2 weeks, maybe more. That makes me even more interested in Kelly Olynyk.
He's on my list because of that reason. And even when Scottie Barnes comes back, Olynyk had taken Chris Boucher's minutes. So there are 15 to 20 minutes available at least for Olynyk, even when Barnes is around. And we know what Olynyk can do per minute. So if you don't have like a great bench or anything, I think it's worth picking up Olynyk just for the upside.
Yeah, no question about that. I think the minutes should continue to pick up as he gets more integrated. And again, you're taking a 34, 35 minute a night guy out of the rotation for the foreseeable future. I also have Duncan Robinson on my list. I feel like I mention him every week, but it's going to be literally hit or miss game to game. But, obviously somebody, if you need 3-pointers, so he's going to give you those on balance. He's got 9 threes over his last 2 games played, 42 total points in those games. Gives you very modest rebounding and assist numbers, give you almost nothing defensively. And, the fact that almost all of his field goal attempts come from beyond the arc, you're not going to get a great field goal percentage. He's hovering around 41.5% on the year. But as far as guys who are widely available, I know everybody shoots a bunch of threes now, but he's making 2.6 threes per game. So I think Duncan Robinson's roster rate, even in deeper leagues, should be quite a bit higher.
Yeah, at the risk of mentioning Malik Beasley for like the 4th video in a row, it's like we need some pivots off of Malik Beasley. So if you're in a deeper league, yes, Robinson was on my list. And you mentioned at the top of the video, the Kings on a 4-game week. If you're in a weekly lineup league, Kevon Huerter is 9% rostered, and his minutes are back up. He's playing, around 25 minutes per game lately. We all know he's one of the most hot and cold players in the NBA. Like Mike Brown can just bench him for huge weeks, and then he'll come back and play well. But while he's hot, if you're in a deep league, you have to think about it. Someone we haven't mentioned in a while, partially because I thought he was going to be out longer, but Donovan Clingan for the Trailblazers, 23% rostered, is like on the verge of a return from a grade 2 MCL sprain, kind of out of nowhere. We're going to end up being one of the fastest grade 2 MCL sprains in history. I think there's going to be a long ramp up. Obviously, they have Rob Williams. They're not going to rush Clingan back and play him like 25 minutes a game when Ayton is available. We kind of know the story here, which is if he's a luxury stash, you put him on your bench. If you have the room, you hope Ayton gets hurt or traded or something, and just anything but playing NBA games. And Clingan could end up being pretty useful. And he's averaging like 2 blocks a game in 16 minutes. So even if he doesn't get more minutes, he's been fine already.
I have Cason Wallace on my list. Yep. I kind of thought the return of Alex Caruso, might be the end of his utility in deeper leagues, but Cason Wallace, continues to start on a lot of nights, continues to play big minutes, saw 31 minutes in the NBA Cup game against Dallas the other night, finished with 11 points, 8 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals, and a block. You know, you're not really in it for the offensive numbers. He is a pretty good rebounder for his size and position, but on balance, you know, the scoring is going to come and go. The rebounds, the assists won't necessarily be there every night, but he's giving you more than 1 3-pointer per game. He's given you 2.1 steals and almost a full block per game over his last 15. So if you need defensive production in a category league, I think go grab Cason Wallace because there's a very good chance he's available.
I mean, their team, I mean, they're an amazing team, but their pure identity is defense. And he is one of their best defensive players and young enough and still developing that he might see some minutes in garbage time still. So you might look at the minutes and be like, I don't know. But he racks up defensive numbers. So someone worth rostering there. 2 guys I'll mention very quickly because I've mentioned them, I think, in other videos. I still think they're under rostered. TJ McConnell, 19% rostered, just been great and under rostered all season. The Pacers continue to just sort of flounder and just look for anything, and McConnell's been really consistent. And then Stephon Castle, still only 24% rostered. He's averaging 27 fantasy points per game since becoming a starter. Like, that is completely standard league. And I will say, you might look at his 8 category or his 9 category ranking and be like, he's like 200th. Like, why are you recommending this guy? If you punt rebounds, he's like 150th in the past 30 days. If you punt percentages, it's the same. If you're not targeting rebounds or percentages, he's a top 100 player over the past month. It's just, I don't want to get too caught up in the rankings thing, but he's averaging about 15 points, 5 assists, and he's good on defense, right? He's playing consistent minutes for the Spurs. I think he should just be on most standard league rosters.
Oh yeah. If you listen to us on SiriusXM, you know how much we love Stephon Castle, specifically in the Rookie of the Year market right now. Can I interest you into Max Strus, Alex, who is looking like he's going to make his season debut on Friday? You know, I do think there will be a ramp up here. Obviously, Cleveland's playing well. They've identified some other bench options who've been able to fill in without any issue for Max Strus. But this is a guy who played 32 minutes a game last season, gave you 12 points, almost 5 rebounds, 4 assists, which was by far a career high. And then, of course, the 3-point shooting, 2.4 makes per game last year at 35%, which at times felt a little disappointing. I mean, he'd been a 40+% guy in his final couple years in Miami. So, maybe some room for that to even improve as he gets healthy.
Yeah, I think for deeper leagues, I'm not sure he'll end up being a standard league guy if Cleveland stays healthy, because they were actually pretty hurt last season. But yeah, someone, if you're in like a 16-team league like you and I are, you have to take a look off the waiver wire.
I want to talk about the Washington Wizards in general. I'm putting Bub Carrington back on the list, not only because Malcolm Brogdon is banged up and has missed a couple of games, but there are reports out there that the Wizards are looking to be a seller before the trade deadline. Believe it or not, the Wizards not looking to acquire pieces. They don't exactly have a wealth of assets that teams may be interested in, but Brogdon is the obvious name. He might be the most obvious trade candidate in the NBA right now. There's been reports that Kyle Kuzma could be on the move. I would imagine they would listen to offers on just about anybody. Jonas Valanciunas, I think, would make sense as well. So once Brogdon is back, which could be as soon as this coming week, you might have to live with Carrington just kind of rotting away on your bench. But mark my words, at some point, Malcolm Brogdon will not be on this roster, and you will be glad that you held on to Bub Carrington.
I agree. I have a Wizard on my list, Justin Champagnie.
Oh yeah, he's on my list too, baby.
Do not get him confused with Julian Champagnie. Although if Julian Champagnie is available, you should probably grab Julian instead. But this is Justin Champagnie for the Wizards. Has really been benefiting from a ton of guys being hurt in Washington. But his past 3 games, he's averaging 15 points, 7 boards, an assist, and 3 stocks in 33 minutes per game, which is actually pretty similar to his like career per 36 type numbers. And someone who I think he'll be relevant like right now for a little bit at least, but like you mentioned, when the Wizards start selling off pieces towards the end of the season, he's on a 2-way deal, so he could have used a lot of his NBA days late in the year.
He wasn't even in the rotation like at all until the past week, but has put up 2 impressive games in a row: 23, 8, 2-2 against Denver, 14, 8, and 5 steals against Memphis. Obviously, Washington has a ton of injuries, but I'm with you. I think he's somebody in a deeper league I would be trying to stash right now if I can. I'll also note Jordan Hawkins for the New Orleans Pelicans. He's still injured. We don't have a firm timetable, but just the amount of pieces in general, especially Brandon Ingram now missing from this Pelicans team, I think there's going to be minutes for Hawkins whenever he's back. And then the final names on my list here, Alex. Kevon Looney. If you need boards, if you're in a deep league, he's 4% rostered right now. Trace Jackson-Davis took a DNP CD over the weekend against Minnesota. He did play in the NBA Cup game against Houston last night. So just kind of keep an eye on that rotation. But if you need rebounds, Kevon Looney could be an option. Anthony Black for the Orlando Magic. He's 3% rostered in ESPN League. Still very hit or miss night to night, but played well against Milwaukee and by default is going to see minutes. And then Andrew Nembhard back from injury for the Indiana Pacers. He's now played 2 games. We'll see where the minutes ultimately settle. I think I'm a little bit lower on Nembhard than consensus. Obviously, somebody who played well in the playoffs, but we're yet to see it for an extended period. With that said, in deeper leagues, I think he's pretty appealing.
I think so too. I do have a pacer on my list, which is Obi Toppin. I'm not like an Obi Toppin guy necessarily, but double-digit scoring in his past 5 games, averaging 14 points, 6 boards, 2 assists, and a stock and a half. He is shooting a little bit above his head. At the same time, he quietly shot 57% from the field last year. And the main thing is that his attempts are up, right? And I talked about the Pacers earlier. They just need something to get going. So that if you're in a deep league, you could stream him in. And then my last guy, who I think I mentioned last week, Precious Achiuwa for the Knicks. The Knicks have no bench, and Achiuwa might only play 15 minutes on most nights. But if there's a blowout or Towns gets hurt, or really anybody in the front court for this Knicks team gets hurt, there should be more minutes available for Achiuwa, who can just stuff the stat sheet.
All right, there we go. Ending on a high note with Precious Achiuwa for the second straight week. We appreciate everybody watching along this season. We'll keep bringing you these waiver wire videos every single week throughout the NBA season. Enjoy the rest of the NBA Cup. Closing in on Christmas already, Alex. Closing in on the trade deadline. A lot going on in the NBA these days. If you're watching us here on YouTube, please make sure you're subscribed to the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball YouTube channel. You can find all of our standalone videos there. You can find all of our podcasts on YouTube, both live and archived. Make sure you check out rotowire.com/try, TRY. Free access to everything on our site, rotowire.com/try.